What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Talking About Baseball. Today, it is day 2 of the MLB rankings, and today, obviously, as you could tell from the title, we will be ranking closers. As I said in the first video, which if you haven't watched yet, you should go watch right now, this series is totally given to Draftnik Mark. He is the originator of the series, but I'm doing my own version of it and doing my own rankings. But anyway, let's get started. And number 31 is Lucas Erceg of the Athletics. The Athletics are going to be near the bottom of many of these lists. Lucas Erceg has never been a closer in his life. He was actually drafted by the Brewers as an outfielder early in his career, but he's never been a closer. Shouldn't be a closer on any team except for, of course, the Athletics, as that's where he is, and is just really a middle-of-the-road reliever who really isn't all that great, but he is closing for the worst team in baseball. And number 30 is James McArthur. He was given the Royals' closing job late in the season after they traded away Aroldis Chapman and Scott Barlow at the deadline. He's been really solid. He was really solid in the last month of the season for the Royals with an ERA around 1 in September. I think he could definitely build on that, but I ranked a lot of guys low in my starting pitchers ranking because they were only good for 1 year, and this guy's really only been good for 1 month. The same thing can kind of be said about number 29, which is the White Sox' Gregory Santos. He was really good to start the season, but began to falter by the end of the season. He still finished with a pretty solid year, but I think he can definitely build on that and be the White Sox closer for years to come if he can just get the home runs and walks down, because his stuff looks really good. And number 28 is the Nationals' Kyle Finnegan. On most teams, he would probably just be a decent middle reliever, but on the Nationals, he's their closer. He was actually pretty solid last year and was close to being one of their all-stars. He's still a pretty solid closer and throws really hard, but he's definitely not one of the best, and that's why he's at number 28. And number 27 is Jose Leclerc of the Rangers. He did just help them to a World Series run, but he also made it closer than it should have been, giving up a 3-run go-ahead home run to Jose Altuve in that run as well. He was coming back from injury last year, and before that injury he looked really good, but also before that injury was a couple of years ago. He did look solid this year, but I think he needs to continue building on that. I don't think he will be the Rangers closer coming into next season, because I do think they will sign someone who's on this list. You may have noticed that I started at number 31. That's because one player on this list is a free agent. I think Leclerc did have a really good postseason run outside of that one game, though, and could be a really solid closer for the Rangers if he does end up needing to be in that role. And number 26 is projected Padres closer Robert Suarez. Obviously, last year it was Josh Hader, and he had a lights-out year. Robert Suarez was really good as his setup man in 2022 before getting injured and missing almost the entirety of 2023. I think he will still be pretty solid in 2024, but he's not exactly very young, but that devastating sinker is definitely going to carry his game if he's going to be successful. The main reason he's this low is because he's coming off of a year where he barely pitched due to injury, as I already mentioned. And number 25 is the Rockies' Daniel Bard. He had a very long fall off after last year. He was dealing with some mental issues again, which is the reason he left the game for a very long time. And also this year, I think his age finally started to show. He was dealing with some other injuries and also just didn't really have a great season in general. And I think the same thing could be said about Clay Holmes of the Yankees, who will be at number 24. He definitely had a rough season after being one of the best relievers in the game in 2022. He was not near as good as he was in 2022 and 2023, but I do think he'll be able to have a small bounce back year. Not as good as he was in 2022, but still be a very solid reliever for the Yankees, as they now have Juan Soto and Aaron Judge, along with Garrett Cole on the pitching staff, and I think that big three will be able to carry them, and hopefully Clay Holmes will be able to close out games for them. And number 23 is Alex Lang of the Tigers. It could also be argued that it should be Jason Foley, but Lang was their closer for most of the year last year, and also for most of the year did a very good job. He was just like Kyle Finnegan of the Nationals. He was also almost an all-star, but for them it went to Michael Lorenzen. He had a very solid season. Also, after the All-Star break, he wasn't quite as good as he was before it, but he was very solid. He was part of a 3-way no-hitter for the Tigers when they no-hit the Blue Jays in July, and I think he can be a really solid closer for an up-and-coming Tigers team that when I do my MLB predictions, I'll slightly spoil it, I think will be first place in that division next year. And number 22 is Rays closer Jason Adam. I think he's a really solid setup man, and that's pretty much what the back of that Rays bullpen looks like. This could have also been Pete Fairbanks, but currently projected by Fangraphs, it is Jason Adam. I think they just have like 3 pretty much setup guys in the back of their bullpen and don't really have a true closer. Jason Adam doesn't really have big wipeout stuff. He's more of a guy that'll make you swing and miss on off-speed pitches, as his fastball mainly ranges in the low 90s. At number 21 is my Chicago Cubs, Adbert Alzolay. Originally, he was supposed to be a starting pitcher, but he's moved into the bullpen and taken over the closer role for the Cubs. He was really good in the middle of the season last year when the Cubs started to pick up heat, but by the end of the year, he got an injury, and when he came back, he just wasn't the same guy. He looked really solid in the middle of the year, though, and I think he'll be able to build on that for next year, and I think he can be one of the best young closers in the league in a couple of years. At number 20 is Carlos Estevez of the Angels. After signing for a cheap 2 to 3 year deal with them last offseason, he looked amazing last year. He was absolutely outstanding and set an Angels record with 20 for 20 saves to begin a season, which obviously, as I already mentioned, is a record in Angels history. He still has 1 year left on his deal, and even though he ended last year pretty rough, I do think he'll still be able to put together a pretty solid season this year. At number 19 is Orioles closer Yennier Cano. He will be their closer for most likely all of 2023 after Felix Bautista underwent Tommy John surgery. Yennier Cano looked very solid in the last month of being their closer after Bautista went down with the injury. Last year was his only season of being good, but he was absolutely outstanding. He has a very good sinker and slider combo that makes a hitter from any side miss. He just needs to control the walks more, as control is easily his main problem right now. At number 18 is Kenley Jansen of the Red Sox. He looked really solid last year, getting his 400th save. Obviously, he's been slowly getting worse and worse as he gets older. He is now 36 years old, but I still think he can be a really solid closer for a Red Sox team that apparently is trying to make a run next year, although I find that very unlikely. At number 17 is the Blue Jays' Jordan Romano. He really hasn't put up a great season yet in his career, but he's been consistently average or above average every single year with the Blue Jays. He hasn't really had a big postseason game or a big series where he's just really gone off as a closer, and like I said, he doesn't really have the postseason experience yet. But with the Blue Jays looking to get someone big after missing out on Shohei Ohtani, they're now looking to either bring back Matt Chapman or get someone like Cody Bellinger, or maybe even both. And I think that Jordan Romano will benefit from that, because I do think the Blue Jays, with the offseason moves they're supposed to make, will be a playoff team next year. At number 16 is the Marlins' Tanner Scott. He looked really solid last year after just being kind of middle of the road for a couple of years. He was really good out of a Marlins team that ended up making the playoffs, which was a surprise to many people, including me. I think he could easily lead their bullpen to another playoff appearance next year, and I do think that he will be their closer yet again, as obviously that's why he's on this list. At number 15 is Braves' current closer, Raisel Iglesias. They have a lot of guys that could potentially be their closer. Last year it was supposed to be AJ Minter, but after a very bad season, it was Raisel Iglesias once he came back from injury. I do think that Iglesias will be pretty good in the closer role, as he's done it many times before, mainly with the Reds and Angels in the past years, and he has succeeded a lot in that role except for his last year with the Angels when he got traded to the Braves, which was 2022. At number 14, I have Paul Sewald. He just got traded to the Diamondbacks and will have 1 more year there. Despite giving up a big home run to Corey Seager, which blew the World Series Game 1, I do think that the Diamondbacks will be a contender for years to come, and I think that, at least for this year, Paul Sewald will be the headliner of that bullpen and still be great at closing out games for them, and he had some signature celebrations in the playoffs that you're probably watching right now. At number 13, I have Ryan Helsley. He had a very rough season with injuries and just not really performing as good as he did in 2022, and eventually the closer role was handed over to Giovanni Gallegos. I do think that it'll be him this year, and he will take back his closing job, and I think he'll do much better than he did last year. His fastball is extremely fast, hitting 100 miles per hour consistently, and I think if he can take down the walks and home runs, which is many relievers' problems that throw very hard, I think he can be a great closer yet again, just like he was in 2022. He just needs to find that form again. At number 12, I have Jose Alvarado. He is currently projected to be their closer after they lost Craig Kimbrell and demoted him out of the closer role after he was terrible in the 2023 playoffs. Alvarado has been a main part has been a main part or the main part in the Phillies bullpen for their last 2 postseason runs, and being a World Series run in 2022, as all of you should probably know. Alvarado is one of the few lefties on this list, actually, which is interesting. There's actually not a single lefty above him on the entire list. He's also just another absolute flamethrower, which is pretty much most of these guys above him. And I do think that Jose Alvarado, even though he is kind of creeping up in age, just like this next guy, is still very good. And the next guy I was talking about at number 11 is Ryan Pressly of the Houston Astros. Despite having kind of a rough start, he ended his season very well for the Astros, and he has proven that at 35 years old, he can still be a very good reliever. Even though, like I said, he is very old, I think that he's going to continue to be a great reliever with his slurve and slider. Most of his stuff breaks away from righties and curves into lefties, which is a good strategy, and he is one of the few guys at the top here with really only one other guy that isn't an absolute flamethrower. Beginning our top 10 is Andres Munoz of the Mariners. I personally think that this year will be his breakout year. I think that the Mariners are going to go get someone really big in free agency, whether it be a hitter or a pitcher or both. I think they are going to make a big trade, as well as a lot of their young starting pitchers have been in trade talks. And I think that Andres Munoz will be leading this bullpen and this team to a playoff appearance and maybe even get very deep into the playoffs. At number 9 is Evan Phillips of the Dodgers. They completely recreated Evan Phillips. He was pretty much a nobody before late 2021, and in 2022 he had a really good season, and he is now in the top 10 of the closer rankings. At number 8, I have the Pirates' David Bednar. He's been in trade talks every single offseason and trade deadline, but not so much this offseason so far. He's a flame-throwing closer that pretty much just started to be good in 2021, and I think that he's going to continue to be a great closer for a Pirates team that really has never been that great the whole time he's been on the team. I want to see how he would perform in the playoffs. At number 7 is the Brewers' Devin Williams. Despite winning the NL Reliever of the Year, I have a few NL closers above him on this list, one of them even in his division. Devin Williams is mainly carried by a nasty changeup that he has, along with a few other pitches that he throws very well. This is my Chicago Cubs. He blows the game most of the time, which is very nice to watch. But obviously, he can be one of the best closers in the league, and most likely top 5 in just a few years after some of these older pitchers at the top fall down a little bit. At number 6 is Reds closer and brother of Edwin Diaz, Alexis Diaz. Alexis Diaz just came into the league in late 2022, and he has not upset anyone. He had such a good performance in his short 2022 year that he was made the closer early in 2023, and he had a great season this year. He was their all-star, and he pitches very similar to his brother, but obviously, as he's still only very young, he's not at his brother's standards yet, but I think that he will be there in just a few years. Beginning our top 5 is the Giants' Camilo Doval. He is amazing. He has a great cutter, slider, and fastball, which is similar to a guy that's only 2 spots above him, and he's just slightly worse. Camilo Doval is also still very young, but the main thing with him is that the Giants, the 2 years he's been good, which are the last 2 years, have not been a contender. They just signed Jung-Hoo Lee to a 6-year, $113 million deal, and I think that will help them be a playoff contender, but on paper, I still don't think that roster is looking very good. At number 5, I have the Minnesota Twins' Yohan Duran. He has a nasty fastball and splitter combo, throwing his splitter almost 96 miles per hour, which seems absolutely unhittable. He's another guy hit hard with home runs, but that's pretty much the standard for all closers in the league. If they're not closing it out, they're going to be allowing a big home run that will lose the game. But the better you get as a closer, the less percentage that happens. Yohan Duran has a very small percentage of that happening, as he is one of the most unhittable closers in the league, and that shows in his numbers. At number 3 is Emmanuel Clase of the Guardians. He is reportedly in trade talks this offseason, and I'm not surprised why. He definitely had a kind of a bad season last year with a lot of blown saves. When he did shut the door, he slammed it. His only problem is he does give up quite a few blown saves, and that showed in 2023. I do think that he'll do slightly better in 2024, and I do think if he does get traded away from the Guardians, who are not going to be a playoff contender, that he will do better. At number 2 Even after he did not pitch a single pitch in 2023, I have Edwin Diaz of the New York Mets. He tore a ligament in his knee in the World Baseball Classic after celebrating a Dominican Republic win, which caused him to miss the entire 2023 season. After the Mets were not looking playoff bound, they decided to just keep him off of their team and get ready for 2024, and that's what he's been doing. The Mets provided him with a lot of things at the very beginning because Steve Cohen is a great owner and a great kind of general manager as he makes some of the decisions. I think Edwin Diaz is just a really good closer overall, and like I said, his brother kind of has a mold of him, and if you've ever seen either of them pitch, you know how good they are. And finally, at number 1, the only free agent on this list is Josh Hader. He is obviously currently a free agent, as I just said, and I think there's a lot of different teams that he could potentially sign with. I personally think it will be the Texas Rangers, as they need bullpen help, as their closer Jose Leclerc was ranked at 27 on this list. Josh Hader just has great strikeout stuff and didn't really help the Padres to a playoff appearance last year, as that's not really his fault though. He didn't really start off the year very good, but he ended it amazing. He only had one full year with the Padres, and he looked great. Like I said, they were not a playoff contender, but in 2022, when they were a playoff contender, he was kind of worse, which could give you some worries that he's not great in big moment situations. But if you look back to the years like 2018 and 2019, when he was on those really good Brewers teams, I think you know how good he is in the playoffs. Anyway, that is the end of my closer rankings videos and day 2 of the Christmas series. I'll see you tomorrow with the catcher rankings. Bye. Alex Lang of the Tigers.